This week on Connecticut Power and Politics, Chauvin guilty. The cop who killed George Floyd guilty of murder. Will the verdict change things here? Vaccine vote. Connecticut moves closer to ending religious exemptions for school shots. And eat the rich? Democrats push a new tax on the wealthy, but will Governor Lamont stand in the way? Power and Politics starts right now. Hi everyone, I'm John Craven. Welcome to Power and Politics. Making news this week, Derek Chauvin, the cop who killed George Floyd, found guilty of murder.
Count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. Count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. Count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty.
Guilty on all counts. Chauvin will be sentenced in 2 months. Here in Connecticut, George Floyd's murder led to a major police accountability law. Here's a look at what's already changed and what's coming. After George Floyd's murder,
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
thousands took to Connecticut streets.
The measure is adopted.
And lawmakers took action, passing sweeping police reforms. Some changes started immediately. It's now easier to decertify cops for excessive force or racial profiling. Towns can form civilian review boards with subpoena power. And in 2021, officers now have to get a behavioral health assessment every 5 years.
This is about a system and individuals within a system who need to be cleaned out.
I can't breathe!
If cops witness excessive force, they now have to intervene. But there's still work to be done.
That's right, Argyle Street!
A new inspector general is supposed to investigate police shootings, but no one's been hired yet. And new limits on chokeholds were recently delayed until 2022. But the big change comes on July 1st. Citizens will finally be able to sue individual cops, but the officer only pays if they're found guilty of an egregious violation.
It is a complete reworking of our job.
Last summer, the head of Stamford's police union predicted a wave of retirements.
I'm hearing that every day. As soon as this law started coming out, I started receiving text messages, phone calls from some of our officers going, I guess it's time to leave.
All right, you just heard from police. Now let's talk to the two men who wrote this law. Representative Steve Staffstrom from Bridgeport and State Senator Gary Winfield from New Haven. They both chair the Judiciary Committee. You know, Gary, after the Derek Chauvin verdict, a lot of people were out celebrating. But on Facebook, you wrote, "I'm not as clear as some others about my feelings in this moment. I'm not sure when I see a nation spent a majority of its summer on our roads and greens demanding accountability, and yet when the moment arrived, held its breath, despite the advocacy, despite the video, despite the knee." So put aside being a lawmaker for a second. As a Black man with children, does this verdict change anything for you?
I don't know that it does. What I was trying to express there was that this is a highly unique situation with highly unique advocacy, with video from multiple angles, lots of witness and clear broad daylight. And yet with all of that, many of us, and not just Black folks who you would expect to be a little skeptical, but many people still looked at this and said, probably not going to happen. So I don't know that this changes anything given the unique nature of it, but one can hope, right? And I think part of being who I am and part of being Black in this country is being hopeful. So I think it's to be determined.
In cases like George Floyd's, a new independent inspector general will investigate whether an officer used excessive force. But 9 months later, the position remains unfilled. The state only interviewed, I think, 2 people for the job because it's limited to the current pool of prosecutors. All right, so 2 questions. 1, are we ever going to fill this job? And 2, how independent is this inspector general if it's a prosecutor?
Let me start by saying the answer is yes, we are going to fill it. And in fact, we did realize, I think, some of the vulnerabilities in the law that was passed last summer after the Criminal Justice Commission did its interview and came back with only 2 candidates, and in fact was deadlocked. So we have legislation pending, which I believe will be voted on in the Senate shortly, to change the appointment process for the Inspector General, and also to expand the applicant pool so that we can hire somebody from outside of the Division of Criminal Justice.
You know, after this law passed, we heard calls to go even further, especially the ACLU was saying, hey, let's look at how we do traffic stops even.
I think this is an ongoing discussion, which is why I think it's important for all of the people who are a party to this, all of the players in this, to make sure that they're a part of the discussion. What we don't want to do is pass something without the input necessary and find ourselves in a place where we have to go back and make changes, which we're going to have to do on any legislation in order to get it correct.
You know, we were pretty proud of the fact that Connecticut was the first state in the country to enact meaningful police reform following the killing of Mr. Floyd back in June. But we said at the time, and continue to believe, that that was not the end of the conversation. And one of the areas we knew we kind of left for a later date was this issue of secondary traffic stops, or the notion that someone is pulled over for, should someone be able to be pulled over for something as simple as a broken taillight or not.
So last month, lawmakers changed part of the police accountability law when it comes to use of force. It now says officers can use deadly force if they have, quote, reasonably determined that there are no available reasonable alternatives. Okay, so that's a lot of legalese there. Police chiefs did ask for this change. In plain English, why the change, and does it water the law down?
Why the change, I think, is because from the get-go, the change to the use of force policy was never about trying to get cops in trouble or play a game of gotcha. What it was about is increasing the standard and making sure we have at or near the most restrictive use of deadly force policy in the country.
There were concerns about whether a police officer would have to go through a very difficult process in order to use force. And by that, I mean, if they would necessarily have to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And I think all of us recognize that in a moment like that, that's not what we were getting at, and that's not what would be functionally possible. And so what we tried to do with the language is hew to what we were trying to do originally in the bill, but also allow police officers to actually act in those instances. And it's why the language is as convoluted as it is.
So before we go, I don't think we can have a conversation about social equity without talking about marijuana. This bill, it seemed fast-tracked for a while, legalization. Now it seems like it might be hung up between Governor Lamont's office and the social equity aspects of it. Is this going to get stalled again, or is this going to pass? Are we going to find a compromise?
Yeah, I don't see it as hung up. In the background, we continue to have discussions, particularly on the social equity aspects and on the taxation and spending of the revenue aspects.
And I think you will see in the next 2 or 3 weeks a beginning of a coming together that many people don't believe is going to happen, but I believe will.
Hope springs eternal. All right, we'll end it where we began with the Derek Chauvin verdict. Did both of you talk to your kids about this yesterday?
This is an ongoing conversation in our household, and yesterday doesn't change that. What I hope changes that is that America changes.
I actually watched the president's address to the nation with my older daughter last night. And, I think I was really struck watching her watch the first female, first Black vice president of the United States address this issue last night. And I don't think anybody could say it more eloquently than she did last night.
Now, like we mentioned earlier, the next phase of Connecticut's police accountability law is the most controversial: the end of guaranteed qualified immunity for officers. That begins in July. We are back in 3 minutes. Next, have a religious objection to vaccines? Soon that may not be enough to enroll your kids in school. I'm John Craven. This is Power and Politics. It took 16 hours, but this week the Connecticut House voted to end religious exemptions for school vaccines. Current students will be exempt. News 12 Connecticut's Sean McCabe says the debate is heated.
This bill protects the health of all Connecticut residents.
Contentious debate all day long in Hartford.
Why would somebody want to move into the state of Connecticut knowing that they couldn't have their child educated?
Ahead of the final vote on House Bill 6423. The bill would end religious exemptions to vaccination for newly enrolled public school students.
And the data is clear that our biggest concerns are with the kindergarten cohorts and those around that age.
In its original form, students were grandfathered in if they were already enrolled in 7th grade and above. A new amendment today extends that to all students K through 12.
We would be creating more disparities and inequities, and it's for those reasons that I do rise in support of the amendment.
House GOP members say the new law would bar thousands from a public education, and they don't know why the move is necessary.
It's not an emergency, it's not a crisis. I'm not going to apologize for 96% compliance rate in this state and 5th in the country.
Dems say religious exemptions are on the rise, and taking steps now will protect schools' herd immunity in the future.
Good public health policy is, by definition, proactive, not reactive.
Some Republicans say parents should have more choice over an ever-increasing vaccination schedule.
I'm talking about 5 doses in the 60s, and we're talking about 72 doses.
The bill's supporters saying the only exemptions should be in the hands of medical experts.
To substitute the legislature and its political inclinations because parents may have concerns, well, isn't that why we're here right now?
Sean McCabe, News 12, Connecticut.
Well, the vaccine bill now heads to the state Senate. Here to talk about that and a few other topics at the Capitol this week are Senate Majority Leader Bob Duff from Norwalk and Tony Wong, the top Republican on the state's Public Health Committee. So this debate ran a marathon 16 hours in the state house. But one of your colleagues, Senator Matt Lesser, joked on Twitter, we'll do it in 10 minutes upstairs. First of all, I've never seen you guys do anything in 10 minutes in the state Senate. But seriously, it does seem inevitable that this is going to pass.
Yeah, I feel very confident it's going to pass because this is all about public safety and public health and keeping our kids safe. This is about making sure that kids who enter school are vaccinated according to CDC guidelines, and people aren't using a loophole that they've used for many years about religious exemptions and non-medical exemptions. What we've seen over the last few years really is an increase in measles cases. In fact, we just had a measles case here in Fairfield County last week, and we're trying to stay ahead of this.
Tony, you're on the Public Health Committee. You sat through a 24-hour virtual hearing. A lot of people don't like this bill.
Thank you, John. And that debate would have gone on longer. In fact, over 1,800 people signed up to testify, and only about 250 got a chance to voice their opinion. So the process was dubious at best in regards to a transparent and accessible process for many people who felt otherwise. But let me be emphatically clear. I believe in the science and the benefits of vaccines. I myself have taken the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. All my children have gone through all the vaccinations. This is, to me, a consideration of process and protected rights. And it's important to distinguish. Look, there are health concerns, but we are taking an approach of looking at body choices and looking at state making a mandate on individuals' choices of injecting anything into their bodies. Another critical consideration that I'm troubled by is the fact that the state of Connecticut, as part of its constitution, has a requirement to provide free education to every child. This bill, in essence, removes those children from education, not only in our K through 12, but it also applies to daycare and to our higher education institutions. So it is a broad overreach.
Bob, what do you say to parents who say, look, you know, I just, for whatever reason, I don't feel comfortable inoculating my kids, but they shouldn't get kicked out of school?
Well, nobody is forcing their child to take vaccinations for measles, mumps, rubella, polio, which we know has literally saved millions of lives over the last few decades. Where we've now seen, again, more measles cases, which is highly contagious, the most since 1992. We saw a measles case here in Fairfield County last week. We've seen measles cases in Connecticut last year. This is a problem. And a lot of times government is reactive. I think at this point, we're trying to be a little bit more on the proactive side as well. People's decisions not to vaccinate their children, that's their personal decision, and that's fine. But their decisions also put my family and your family and everybody else's family at risk.
I believe that it is not a loophole. It is an opportunity to give people choice, but we need to educate. We need to consistently raise the awareness.
Before we go, let me address the obvious question, though. If we can't get enough people to take the COVID vaccine, will we get to a point where we have to require it, at least for people in workplaces or kids in school? I mean, 65, 75%, that's not enough for herd immunity.
Well, we take our recommendations from the CDC, and I think that's best left to science, and it's best left to our medical professionals to make some of those decisions. I don't think it helps anybody for us to pontificate here on this show about whether or not we will mandate some sort of vaccine. I think everybody should get their COVID vaccination. And I think that it will make our community safer.
You would now have the state mandate that every person would have to have the COVID vaccine. And that's unfathomable. That's not possible.
Tony, you've heard the criticism. Do you think this is a slippery slope towards requiring people to get the COVID vaccine? Because that's what a lot of people are saying out there.
It's a concern that I have, right? As I made clear, I am fully supportive of the science of the vaccine. As a bio chair, caucus chair, I believe in that. But when do you cross the line in regards to the state telling you as a parent, as an individual, to inject something into your body?
Well, the final vote on religious exemptions is Tuesday in the state Senate. Governor Lamont says he will sign the bill. All right, next, take from the rich and give to the poor. The new Robin Hood tax plan out of Hartford in 2 minutes. We're back on Power and Politics. I'm John Craven. Our last word today, taxes. Democrats are out with a big cut for working class families, but there's a catch. The rich would pay a lot more. Call it Robin Hood. Connecticut Democrats are out with a new tax plan, asking more from the rich and less from the working class.
We saw a very, very difficult year for a lot of people in the state of Connecticut. And there were also a lot of people, as you just alluded to, who did just fine during this time.
The plan creates a new consumption tax for anyone making more than $500,000. The ultra-wealthy would also pay 2% more on Wall Street income.
Not really my thing, no.
Governor Lamont, a millionaire himself, thinks it's a bad idea.
Connecticut's got some momentum now. We've got jobs that are being created. We got companies coming to the state of Connecticut. I don't want to do anything to stop that momentum.
Lamont says leave the tax hikes to President Biden, who wants to double the federal capital gains tax. The governor does support a mileage fee for big trucks, but critics say it'll raise grocery prices.
I'm making a prediction that this is going to lead to the rest of us. There'll be a vehicle tax on all of us.
Now, the tax relief. For working class families, there's a lot of it. Democrats want to double the state earned income tax credit. There's a new child credit for parents.
It's the same thing.
And restaurants could hold on to more money too.
We tried very hard to find the balance here, and I feel like we did.
Now the question is, can Democrats and their governor actually agree on a new budget? We shall see, right? Well, the State Tax Writing Committee approved the Democrats' budget on Thursday. Now lawmakers start negotiating with Governor Lamont. That's all of our time for this week. We want to hear from you. Email us or comment at news12.com or our social media platforms. And you can catch Power and Politics every Saturday and Sunday at the times right there on your screen. That's all of our time. I'm John Craven. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.